Brought to you by Charity Mobile. Switch to the phone company that supports your beliefs. All plans start under $50 before taxes and surcharges. Use promo code TRADITION at CharityMobile.com for a special offer.
Today we have a story out of Spain, one that's been brewing for 2 years, involving a group of nuns, the Poor Claires of Belorado, who had been in conflict with their bishop. Like they were facing eviction and cancellation and the rest, and they were faced with some choices, and they took what seems like the most extreme choice of all, declaring themselves to be sedevacantist. I'm not joking about that. I'm not misinterpreting a hard-line traditionalist, maybe they don't think Francis is valid position with sedevacantism. No, they got associated with a sedevacantist bishop, an actual bishop who does not believe there has been a valid pope since 1958. Actual sedevacantism, as opposed to interregnumism or Beniplenists or whatever you want to call them. And this has gotten caught up now in the secular court. So I'm going to give you first the story of the day, and then we're going to do a little background on it so we get an idea of what it is that I think is not going to be an isolated case. So we go here to the Catholic Herald, which I will be the first to note for you. The Catholic Herald is not going to be objective on this story. They can't be. This is a group of nuns who declared themselves to be in schism from Rome. They've declared it as such. They want nothing to do with Rome. So the Catholic Herald will not be in the least unbiased in this. But you're going to have a hard time finding an unbiased source on this. In fact, I don't think an unbiased report exists. So we just have to wade through the muck a little bit. The headline, published on Saturday: Bishop evicts sedevacantist Spanish nuns from their convent. Now, what you're going to find here, as we go over this story, there have been a lot of attempts by the bishop to evict the nuns. In fact, he's gotten courts multiple times to rule in his favor on this, but due process in the Western world being what it is, the nuns sought help in other levels of the court system. Well, they lost. What comes next? Who knows? A court in Brevisca, Spain, has upheld the eviction of the Poor Claires of Belorado by the Archbishop of Burgos, Mario Echeta. The religious sisters broke from Rome in May last year when their superior, Sister Isabel de la Trinidad, released a 5-page open letter on the 13th of May along with an extensive 70-page Catholic manifesto. Now, I'm going to pause here. I can't find this document online, and no article citing this has a link to it. Again, you would, if they were being unbiased, they would let you read what they said for themselves, but they're not doing that. The community initially declared their allegiance to sedevacantist Bishop Pablo de Rojas Sanchez Franco. Rojas leads a heretical group called the Pious Union, which has chapels and mass centers around Spain. They hold the sedevacantist position, which maintains that there have been no valid popes since Pius XII. Some date this further back to Pius X. That is an extreme minority position among sedevacantists, due to liturgical and theological reforms, which they claim excommunicated subsequent popes. However, the nuns quickly split from Rojas and aligned with another sedevacantist bishop. He also later departed, and the sisters' spiritual needs are now met by an Argentinian sedevacantist priest, Jesus Casas Silva. 5 elderly members of the community did not sign the superior's letter and therefore did not incur excommunication. These sisters, aged between 86 and 100, were visited on the 1st of August by church officials and offered the opportunity to be transferred to another Poor Clare convent in communion with Rome. However, the nuns are understood to have declined the request. So you have a group of nuns who did not join in with the sedevacantist declaration, but they have still refused to be moved out of their home. The nuns' legal team have said they will appeal the ruling. They have 20 days to do so. If they refuse to leave, they may be escorted by police from the property. So I'm going to remind you of a story in Texas of the Arlington Carmelite nuns. No, they're not sedevacantist, but they got accused of some pretty wild stuff that didn't stand up under scrutiny. The most egregious thing they got accused of was the abbess of the convent having engaged in we'll call them liaisons with a priest. That didn't stand up under scrutiny. The priest was actually investigated by his own bishop and found to have done nothing at all. So, okay. Well, that didn't stop the bishop of Arlington, Texas, from trying to seize their land. And so those nuns broke off communion from him and now get their sacraments from the Society of St. Pius X. And they've generally kept their head down in the news since then, although periodically the Bishop of Arlington will actually attack them in the media for reasons that remain unknown. It's odd to me that these nuns jumped from being a normal, traditionally minded convent in Spain right into sedevacantism. I do wonder if they ever reached out to the SSPX, who have a pretty big presence in Europe, for any kind of support. Let me know if you have any inside information on that. I am very curious to know because I could find nothing on it. But let's go to some context here. The ongoing story with these nuns is 2 years in the making. And quite frankly, not a lot of reporting out of it other than from Info Vaticana. They've led the way on this. They are, however, in their reporting, also biased against the nuns, which I can't blame them for. I'm not a sedevacantist. I don't have anything against sedevacantists as a group, but it's hard to, it's hard, right? The headline here is the Poor Claires of a village in Burgos and renounce the authority of the bishop and declare themselves sedevacantists. May 13th, 2024. That's a year into the drama. There's talk of a schism within the Church of Burgos following the Poor Claires' announcement that they would abandon the guardianship of Archbishop of Burgos, Monsignor Mario Iceta, and refuse to recognize Francis as the legitimate pope. Again, May 2024. In a forceful statement signed by Sister Isabel de la Trinidad, Mother Abbess of this Poor Clare community, they denounced that, quote, events of great magnitude have taken place, which have shaken the soul of the contemplative sisters, a soul accustomed to depth. They affirm that in the face of so much, quote, serious and certain news, we are painfully confronted by the stubborn silence of the shepherds. Silence and acquiescence, leaving the sheep alone without the protection or defense against the wolves. In other words, they're saying that the bishops aren't doing their job of protecting the Catholic faith. This is what happens when the bishops sit there and play kissy face with the world. You get groups and individuals who leave the Catholic Church for other religions. You don't leave the Catholic Church. You don't do that. It doesn't prove the reality of orthodoxy or Luther's claims or whatever. What it proves is that Satan has his sights on the Catholic Church, and he's been desperately trying to destroy it. And when you get bishops who shouldn't be there, playing kissy face with the secular world, aligning themselves with secular causes, like in my news story today, right after this live stream, I have a news story going live for you, pre-recorded form, of the bishops of the United States who were trying apparently to get Hillary Clinton elected president back in 2016. That stuff drives people out of the church. And in this case, they wanted the Catholic faith, but they didn't want the shepherds. So what did they do? They went to sedevacantism. There were other options. Sedevacantism is definitely better than becoming Orthodox, though. Furthermore, they also point to Rome and criticize the fact that, quote, contradictions, double and confusing language, ambiguity, and doctrinal gaps have been arriving from the chair of Peter in recent years. These events have forged among the sisters, quote, a doubt about the one who steers the ship of Peter and his immediate collaborators, a doubt that over time became a scandal. The Poor Clare nuns denounced that, quote, this doctrinal and moral chaos, far from abating, has escalated to unimaginable extremes in recent months. They also assert they are victims of persecution and of being, quote, blocked from Rome for refusing to grant us a license to sell the Dario convent, a license that they say will probably remain in the office of Mr. Mario Iceta and the president until the end of time. In other words, they wanted to sell the convent, probably to get property more suited to their needs. See how this always goes back to property. Always. It was the case in Arlington. There was those nuns in Nebraska and in Pennsylvania. It always goes back to property. Always. We're never going to be done with this persecution of nuns over property. And as you see here, the nuns broke a month later. In a statement on their Instagram account, the nuns confirmed that they are continuing with the schism and prefer to remain under the jurisdiction of the fake bishop, Pablo de Rojas, and the bartender, Francisero. Now, since this story, they've kicked him to the curb and got another bishop after him and kicked him to the curb, and now just get support from an SSPX, or not an SSPX, but a sedevacantist priest. The schismatic nuns of Belorado reject Archbishop Aceta's summons to appear before an ecclesiastical tribunal, calling the proposed excommunication a farce. Remember, if you're a sedevacantist, you don't think the institution calling itself the Catholic Church is actually the Catholic Church. They, sedevacantists, will sometimes appear in my comments saying, Anthony, you talk about the ape of the church that's coming. It's been here since 1958. That's what they'll say. They believe that any excommunication from the ape of the church is a farce. And if the prophesized ape of the church does fully manifest itself, if it hasn't already, then it would be a farce to be excommunicated by it, because you're being excommunicated by a fake entity. So who cares? That's the attitude of the nuns here. The nuns who voluntarily separated from the conciliar church that emerged from the Second Vatican Council reaffirmed their decision to adhere to the true Catholic faith in a manifesto published on May 13th, Feast of Our Lady of Fatima, 2024. The 10 sisters summoned to appear before an ecclesiastical tribunal from whose jurisdiction we have withdrawn do not have the authority, said tribunal, to impose spiritual punishments, such as the farce of excommunication, they declared in their statement. According to the nuns, any sanctions imposed by ecclesiastical authorities that they consider illegitimate, quote, are ineffective and null and void. The manifesto, signed by Abbess Mother Elizabeth of the Trinity, was unanimously supported by all members of the community. The nuns explained that their separation was the result of mature, thoughtful, and conscious reflection. In a document sent by Burofax, the Archbishop of Burgos, the nuns reiterated their, quote, unanimous and irreversible position and declared their willingness to give their lives for their fidelity to Christ and his Catholic Church, even if they now renounced it to join the sect of the false Bishop Pablo de Rojas. We do not fear that those who can end the body, even through coercion, imposition, or supply blockades, they can do nothing against the soul. Again, you'll notice that there was not exactly unbiased reporting there either. But that's been going on in Spain, and now it's making international headlines. But let's get a little more context here, because the police got involved pretty early on in this process. It's also from Info Vaticana, the only ones reporting on this. Headline, police are investigating the sale of 1.7 kilos of gold by the former abbess of Belorado. And I say former because they don't call them nuns in their reporting here, because they don't believe sedevacantists are actually Catholic, judging from their way they're reporting on this. According to the Diario de Burgos newspaper, the former abbess of the monastery Santa Clara de Belorado, Sister Isabel de la Trinidad, whose real name is the focus of a police investigation after selling 1.7 kilos of gold at a specialized store in Burgos, worth about 130,000 euros. They're looking to see if the gold came from speculative buying and selling operations, or on the contrary, from the scrapping and melting of goods. So the police were investigating. I couldn't find anything about the outcome of that investigation. But when you see what the implication is here, what kind of gold that would be from the scrapping and melting of goods would nuns have access to? Well, those would be mass implements. That's kind of a read between the lines thing. In addition to the gold, the former abbess also reportedly sold a high-value American coin, the origin of which is also unclear. It probably came from a donor. It is unknown whether it was acquired for speculative purposes or instead was part of the donations received by the former nuns before their departure from the Catholic Church. So, there's a lot going on there. So you shouldn't be surprised when you see that after a year of this, 2 years really, even Euronews now, a secular outlet, gives this headline, "The squatting nuns of Belorado continue to resist eviction." They're squatters now in their own home. Only in a world where civil forfeiture and evictions because of failure to pay a mortgage in hardship would you call someone who's trying to resist being kicked out of their home squatting. The Belorado nuns announced last year they were adopting the sedevacantist line of thought. The theological school rejects the authority of all popes since Pius XII, considering the papal seat vacant. The archbishop's response was swift. After learning of the nuns' position, it proceeded to excommunicate them and expel them from consecrated life. measures that represent the most severe sanctions under canon law. Subsequently, the ecclesiastical authorities formally requested that the nuns voluntarily leave the convent, a request that was flatly rejected by the rebellious community. Given the nuns' refusal to obey ecclesiastical orders, the conflict escalated to the point of reaching the civil courts, where the issues of ownership and occupation of the monastery would be resolved. At the same time, the so-called schismatic nuns moved the 5 senior nuns from the convent to the monastery of Orduña the night before the judicial intervention, where they were welcomed. The first instance investigated by the judge ruled in favor of the Catholic Church in the eviction lawsuit filed against the former nuns of Belorado. The trial, held on Tuesday, July 29th, after 2 previous adjournments, concluded with a ruling ordering the immediate abandoning of the monastery. And they will continue to fight it through their appeal system that they have in Spain. That's the story out of Spain right now. It's wild, and this would not happen, we would not be here, if the bishops of Spain and if Pope Francis hadn't taught a new synodal religion, issuing ambiguous documents where the Catholic position was generally written down, but then the instructions were to ignore it in the name of pastoral sensitivity. This all started in 2023, 2 years ago. What was the document that came out around that time? You remember? Fiducia Supplicans was out by then, and that caused a lot of people to essentially lose their faith. Fiducia Supplicans was actually published on the 4th of January 2024. Well, that was when they published a press release. It was actually published December 18th, 2023. And it caused a gigantic backlash for, if you remember, if you were paying any kind of attention for the last couple of years. That had to be part of this. And I'm going to warn you, you're probably going to see more of this. I haven't seen any reverse, of course, yet from Rome, but we'll see. But Cardinal Fernandez recently, within a few days or a couple of weeks of Pope Leo being elected Pope, publicly told people that the chances of Pope Leo rescinding Fiducia Supplicans was 0. He said that. I reported on it here when it happened. And this is what happens when you get this kind of teaching from people who in Rome should know better. Instead, it would be nice if the authorities in Rome and the bishops in major dioceses and even small dioceses around the Western world would stand up for Catholic truth, for basic Catholic truth, especially involving the secular authorities. When politicians and judges and media figures and celebrities and other things push evil on the world, most of the time the bishops remain silent. Rome remains silent most of the time. And one of the consequences of Rome remaining silent, the bishops remaining silent, is that it causes scandal among the laity. Lay people will then feel it is their obligation to stand up for the truth, which it always is. But people will feel emboldened to do so in the face of silence from those in positions of authority in the ecclesiastical hierarchy of the church. When they remain silent, someone has to step up, and who's going to be left to? Religious, your priests, or the laity. And most of the time, it's the laity. And there are consequences for this, especially in places that are outside of the United States. In the U.S., if you stand up against popular positions that fly in the face of the Catholic faith, and you do so online or in public where there's a camera or something, you run the very real risk of having your personal details put all over the internet so you can be harassed, people calling your employer, you losing your job, maybe losing access to financial institutions, those sorts of cancellations. Those are bad enough, and that's an evil practice that should be abolished and made illegal. I don't see it happening, though, but that's bad enough. But in other places, Western Europe and in Australia, where we'll turn to here in a moment, that consequence is much worse. If you stand up and speak for Catholic truth in those places, you will not be canceled in the traditional sense. You'll be canceled in the pre-internet sense. Go to LifeSite News. This headline: Christian doctor loses medical license for criticizing the sacrifice to Moloch, the James Martin ideology, and the policies related to the 2020 affliction. Dr. Jareth Koch was suspended and lost his career for sharing conservative and Christian beliefs online, and a tribunal in Australia is facing backlash for upholding his suspension. This is a crazy story. He spoke his mind online. For the high crime of being a conservative Christian, guess what happened to him? He lost his livelihood to practice medicine. I don't know about you. I don't generally think about the political leanings of the doctors I go to, but generally, if I had to choose, I'd want them to be conservative Christians of some kind, because with that will come with at least the respect afforded for, say, my wife and I's Catholic beliefs on contraception and some other things. You know, a conservative Protestant may not agree with us, but they're not going to give us a hard time about that if they're a doctor. Whereas a secular medical professional who is a progressive of some kind will. We've run into that before. I'm sure you have too. Let me know in the comments if you have. But this doctor told the truth. And he lost his job at the hand of a state-recognized institution with the power to govern the medical profession in Australia. If you ever wonder why people don't speak up more, this is why. From the article, quote, a Christian doctor in Australia was found guilty of professional misconduct, not for substandard patient care, but because he had previously shared social media posts critical of the sacrifice to Moloch, the James Martin ideology, and policies related to the 2020 so-called affliction. Dr. Jareth Koch was suspended over 6 years ago and lost his career. His suspension was upheld on July 25th by the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, which decided that 54 of 85 social media posts published online over a 12-year period were examples of misconduct under the national law. The decision sets a concerning precedent for freedom of speech in Australia. I'm going to interject here. You don't have freedom of speech in Australia. You don't. You might have that's not even a concerning precedent. The things that came before that led to your freedom of speech being taken away from you. Those were the precedents. This is just upholding your evil system. Particularly for professionals who hold Christian or conservative beliefs, declared a statement from the Human Rights Law Alliance, the attorney group that represented Dr. Koch. It confirms that regulators like AHPRA and the medical board have significant powers to discipline practitioners, not only for what they do in their clinical practice, but for upholding and expressing unpopular social or moral views, even in a private capacity, wrote HRLA. This is a deeply concerning shift in regulatory scope over personal speech, noted HRLA. For Christian professionals, and indeed for any professional who holds views outside the progressive mainstream, the implications are serious. Australia's Family First organization slammed the court decision to uphold Koch's suspension, calling it a, quote, gross injustice and chilling attack on freedom of speech. Dr. Koch has harmed no patient. His only crime was to express his views online, many of them satirical or Christian in nature. And for that, he has been punished with the loss of his medical career, said Family First National Director, Director Lyle Shelton. Not just unjust, it's un-Australian, said Shelton. This is Victoria's Ministry of Truth, forcing ideological conformity and crushing dissent. End quote. That is what awaits us as Catholics everywhere. I know I get accused of having a persecution complex when I point these stories out, but across the West, Christians are being persecuted. It's just true. We are. Now, in America, that seems to have abated recently, but after a couple of years of reporting to you on government agencies sending their little snoops into the pews at our parishes, asking questions of priests and threatening them in a bad way if they don't give them details on their parishioners, to think otherwise is just ludicrous. That priest is facing, well, not priest, that doctor is facing the most serious consequences for speaking his mind, what should have been his rights. But Australia gave up on speech rights a long time ago. Damon Keller says, I was fired from my job in 2020 for being Catholic and resisting the solution to the 2020 problem. I lost everything, but our Blessed Mother did not forget me. I now serve priests. Yes. And there is, people are in the live chat here talking about how you're seeing this all over the West. It's true. I mean, we know about the UK. We know about Canada. It's everywhere. They tried to do it in America, and they will try it again if given an opportunity. I'm curious what you think of that story. Let me know in the comments. Are you surprised at all by this? Let me know. Pray for that doctor that as he climbs this judicial hierarchy in Australia, that he wins his case. So let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It absolutely does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps a lot too. And if you've ever thought about supporting the work we do here at Return to Tradition, options in the description box below. Subscribe Star, Patreon. There's that subscribe plus button. That's the old join button. YouTube likes to change that from time to time. All those options, by the way, were asked for by viewers of the channel. They do help keep these daily messages coming, and your support is, as always, greatly appreciated. Please pray for the church. Pray for everybody spoke about in this video today, and also just personal issues. For me, just your prayers would be appreciated as well. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.